We are now on the way to the Palatine property east of Tarden, located at the eastern edge of the wheat belt. Tarden has different soil types. Most are heavy red alluvial clays laid down by rivers, chiefly in the lower parts of their courses a very long time ago. The land is undulating with broad valleys and low, gently sloping hills. The biggest tree growing here is the York gum. It grows in red alluvial clays. It is also the only tree that the galahs and other birds can use for nesting. The galahs are the most common of the cockatoos on the property. Big flocks gather together in June, just before the breeding season begins. It is one of the most beautiful birds in the world, but they are such a common sight that their beauty is often taken for granted or even unnoticed. Breeding pairs may be permanent. Galahs do not breed until they are 3 or 4 years old. Only 10 out of every 100 fledglings survive to the breeding stage. Many young birds die in the early summer while they are learning to live on their own. In the nearest town, Mullewa, you can see big flocks of the little corellas, but here only small flocks of 14 and at most 30 birds. Some of the birds breed in the Tarden district. The corellas are silent and secretive in their nesting area. Little corellas eat the seeds of grasses and legumes, preferring native grass seed to grain crops when the former are available. The birds use the same nests in successive years and nest almost exclusively in hollows, in our case the York gum. The last of the cockatoos we are going to see is the red-tailed black cockatoo. It is the biggest of this family. Because of its great size, brilliant tail pattern and far-carrying cries, it is an easy bird to spot, but it is wary, hard to approach closely. On the farm, the red-tailed black cockatoos are made up of small parties of several families, and you can see them the whole year. The birds spend much of their time feeding in casuarinas and also eat the seeds of Hakea, Grevillea, Banksia and acacias. They also feed on the introduced double G. After the first good rains in May, June and up to September, the bare earth beneath the scrub becomes carpeted with white, gold, pink and purple of the transient annuals, predominantly of the daisy family. Here we show you some of the daisy family growing on the farm. Of course there are other wildflowers growing in Tarden, but there are so many they could be a program in themselves. When the first rains come in May, that is when growth starts. There are only wet and dry seasons here. The pageantry lasts only for a short time. Soon the earth is dry again, but in the dust lie the hard seeds which can survive drought and scorching heat. A scenic view of Hidden Valley on St. Joseph's Farm. It is truly hidden from the people who come here. It was developed over a long time by Mother Nature. It was a wearing away of the earth's surface by water over hundreds of years that created this valley. In this breakaway country there are also a number of orchids growing, such as the blue fairy, sugar candies, and the green-veined shells. The thick-tailed or barking gecko is one of the most attractive and brightly coloured lizards. This is its favourite habitat. It is nocturnal and feeds on small insects. When walking, the lizard lifts itself high off the ground to the full extent of its legs. The name barking comes from the call of the alarmed lizard. The bine-nosed gecko is highly variable in colour, ranging from pale grey through dull brown to bright reddish-brown to almost black. As with a number of geckos, this lizard will discard its tail when picked up. When the new tail is grown, it is most unlike the old. This gecko usually shelters in rock crevices or among ground litter and debris, emerging to forage in open areas at night. Another common name for this lizard is the prickly gecko. Skinks in Australia form a fascinating group. They are most familiar lizards. The shingleback or bobtail that you can see here is one of the most common skink on the property. It has a fat, stumpy tail which so closely resembles its head that it is sometimes known as the two-headed lizard. The shingleback moves very slowly and cannot capture any form of active food except by accident. Its diet consists mainly of herbage, roots, seedlings, and any blossom or fruits that it finds. Shinglebacks do not dig burrows for themselves, but enter rabbit burrows or any other holes they can find in order to avoid the high heat of summer and the cold of winter. They are unusual among skinks in bearing only one brood of young a year, being nearly half as long as the parent when they are born. This is towards the end of winter. The common blue tongue is also a large lizard, growing up to 60 centimetres. It is powerfully built, except that its legs and feet are ludicrously small compared with its thick body, large head and fat tail. Here it is known by another name, the pencil lizard, for obvious reasons. This relatively uncommon western blue-tongue lizard is common here in Tardan. The bright blue tongue is pushed in and out, and the lizard hisses as it turns. To most predators, this threat display would certainly seem to be an effective deterrent. It can also bite quite hard should it get its grip on an attacker. Its coloration is much more marked, consisting of a pale straw-coloured ground with well-defined dark brown or almost black bands encircling the body. A great source of food for many animals are the caterpillars. Some hunting wasps use the caterpillar as a food source for their offspring. Amongst us, processions of people are rather common, but processions of other creatures are more rare. In the bush, when the first rains soften the harshness of the long dry summer, processions can be seen moving like snakes over the ground. A close examination of one of these reveals a mass of hairy caterpillars, each about 5 centimetres in length, moving head to tail in one continuous line. These processionary caterpillars belong to a family of moths, which show a tendency for the caterpillars to move in line. On dull days like this, they can be seen moving during daylight. Should a tree be too small to provide enough food, the insects move from tree to tree. The hairs of these caterpillars are very irritating to human skins and to most bush animals, and they leave these insects alone. A few birds, like the pallid cuckoo and the black-faced cuckoo shrike, they are all here in the bush, and they alone can stomach this prickly meal. The bag we see here becomes filled with a mass of droppings, cast hairs, molted skins and other debris. It hangs in the treetops until a storm brings it crashing to the ground. In this ancient land, the scorpions are, in evolutionary terms, one of the oldest existing types of animal. Fossil remains found in rocks of the Silurian period, some 135 million years ago, are very little different from existing scorpions. This scorpion you can see hunting would have been no different than the scenery from thousands of years ago. It was taken at Hidden Valley, one of the places where people had no interference, and Mother Nature's evolution is still going on at her own pace. There are other families of scorpions here in Tarden, but this is the biggest of them all. It is not so easy to spot a kangaroo in the bush. Only when it moves you can notice these macropods. There are 3 types of kangaroos here. The most common you see is the western grey. The red or plain kangaroos are also in numbers, but the common wallaroo are not seen very often. A kangaroo cannot walk, nor can it easily move backwards. Most macropods are nocturnal, but the species here is active in the early morning and late afternoon. The pouch of this macropod opens forward. It contains 4 teats, but it is usual for only one young to be born at a time. The sun is setting over this ancient land, and it is time to leave Tarden and St. Joseph Farm. We hope that you have enjoyed the little bit of this country that we have shown you, and created some interest in the wildlife that lived here long before people came along.